I'm Melissa, 32 years old, and I never thought my own parents would assault me with a champagne bottle at my brother's birthday party. All because I refused to hand over the keys to my $450,000 condo that my grandmother left me. They called me ungrateful while blood trickled down my face. They had no idea I held the legal power to sell their house from under them. Sometimes the sweetest revenge comes from the most unexpected places. Before I dive into this wild story, let me know where you're watching from the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members who felt entitled to what you worked hard for. Growing up in the Sullivan household meant living under a constant shadow of control. My parents, Diana and Robert, ran our home like a small dictatorship where financial manipulation was their favorite weapon. From an early age, I understood that money meant power, and in our house, they held all the cards. My brother Aaron was always the golden child. 3 years younger than me, he somehow managed to do everything right in their eyes. His baseball trophies lined the mantel, while my academic achievements gathered dust in a box under my bed. When Aaron needed new equipment for sports, money appeared instantly. When I needed a graphing calculator for advanced math, I was told to figure it out, or borrow one. The one person who saw me for who I truly was happened to be my grandmother, Eleanor. Grandma Eleanor was my mother's mother, but they couldn't have been more different. Where my mother was cold and calculating, Grandma was warm and generous. She'd visit twice a month, and those weekends became my sanctuary. "You have a brilliant mind, Melissa," she would tell me while we baked cookies in her kitchen. "Don't let anyone dim your light." Grandma Eleanor had built a small real estate portfolio over her lifetime. She'd started with nothing, purchasing one small property in the 60s, then leveraging it into several more over decades. My mother always spoke about this portfolio with a gleam in her eye, as if already counting the properties that would one day be hers. College was another battleground. My parents made just enough money to disqualify me from financial aid, but refused to contribute a dime toward my education. "College is a waste for girls," my father would say. "You'll just get married anyway." I took out loans, worked 30 hours a week at a coffee shop, and still graduated with honors with a business degree. My success in real estate didn't happen overnight. After college, I worked for a small agency, putting in 60-hour weeks, building a client base from scratch. I lived in a tiny studio apartment with secondhand furniture and saved every penny I could. My parents viewed my career choice with suspicion. "Real estate is risky," my mother would say. "You should find something stable with benefits." When Grandma Eleanor passed away 5 years ago, the reading of her will drop a bombshell on our family. She had left her entire portfolio to me, with one property designated for my immediate use. A gorgeous 2-bedroom condo in Lakeside Heights, valued at $450,000. My parents were stunned into silence, while Aaron looked betrayed. "She must have manipulated Eleanor," my mother hissed to my father in the parking lot after the will reading. They didn't know I could hear them. "There's no way she would have chosen Melissa over us." But Grandma had. The letter she left explained why. "Melissa, you have the same spark I had at your age. You understand that wealth isn't just about money, but about building something meaningful. I know you'll honor my legacy." I moved into the condo and used the rental income from the other properties to pay off my student loans. As my real estate career flourished, I invested in renovating the condo, transforming it into my dream home with an open-concept kitchen, hardwood floors, and a balcony overlooking the park. My parents' attitude toward me shifted in an unsettling way. Suddenly, they were interested in my life, calling frequently, even dropping by unannounced. "We're so proud of what you've accomplished," my father would say, while eyeing my new furniture. My mother would run her fingers along my granite countertops with a strange possessiveness. They began taking credit for my success at family gatherings. "We always encouraged Melissa's independence," my mother told my aunts and uncles. "That's why she's doing so well now." The first direct attempt to control my assets came 3 years ago. My father called, explaining they wanted to borrow $50,000 to invest in a business opportunity. When I asked for a business plan, they were offended. "We're family," my mother said. Family doesn't need paperwork. I refused, and they didn't speak to me for 2 months. Last year, my father's contracting business began failing after he lost several major clients due to missed deadlines. My parents had always lived beyond their means, with a house they could barely afford, luxury cars on lease, and expensive vacations they put on credit cards. As their financial situation deteriorated, their interest in my properties intensified. Your grandmother would have wanted us to be taken care of, my mother said during a Sunday dinner at their house. She just put everything in your name for tax purposes. The hints became less subtle. That condo is really too big for one person, my father mentioned. And this neighborhood has gone downhill. You'd be happier somewhere else. I knew what was coming, but nothing could have prepared me for how far they would go to get what they believed they deserved. The phone call came exactly 1 week before Aaron's 30th birthday party. I was in my home office reviewing contracts when my mother's name flashed on my cell phone screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail but decided to answer, hoping it was just about the party details. "Melissa, your father and I have made a decision," my mother announced without even saying hello. Her voice had that artificial sweetness that always preceded something manipulative. "About what?" I asked, already feeling my guard go up. "We're going to move into your condo. The housing market is perfect right now to sell our place, and we could use the equity to get back on our feet." I nearly dropped my phone. "Move into my condo? Where exactly would I live?" There was a pause. "Well, you could rent somewhere smaller. Or move back home until you find a place. The important thing is that we need to downsize, and your condo is sitting there, practically empty." "It's not empty. I live there." "It's my home," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Don't be selfish, Melissa. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? That condo should have been ours anyway. Your grandmother wasn't thinking clearly when she made that will." The conversation deteriorated from there. My father got on the line, his voice gruff with barely contained anger. "You listen here. We're your parents. We raised you, fed you, clothed you. The least you can do is help us out when we need it." I set a firm boundary. "I'm sorry about your financial problems, but my condo isn't the solution. I'm happy to help you create a budget or look at other options, but I'm not giving up my home." My father's response chilled me. "We'll see about that. Family takes care of family, Melissa. One way or another." After hanging up, I sat in my office, hands shaking. This wasn't the first time they'd tried to guilt me into giving them money or assets, but something about my father's tone felt different. More desperate. More threatening. The next few days were filled with aggressive text messages from both parents. My mother switched between guilt trips. "I was in labor with you for 18 hours, and fake concern. We're just worried about you living alone." My father was more direct. "You're making a big mistake." Aaron's birthday party was now looming like a dark cloud. I considered not attending, but my relationship with my brother was already strained. Though he often sided with our parents, he was still my brother, and I wanted to maintain some connection with him. I went shopping for his gift, selecting an expensive watch I knew he'd been eyeing. The price made me wince, especially since Aaron rarely reciprocated with thoughtful gifts, but I hoped it might ease some of the tension between us. My friend Victoria met me for coffee the day before the party. We'd been friends since college, and she was one of the few people who truly understood my family dynamics. "Are you sure you want to go?" she asked, stirring her latte. "It sounds like they're getting desperate, and desperate people do crazy things." "It's a public place," I reasoned. "What could they possibly do at a restaurant with a whole family watching?" Victoria gave me a look. "Your parents care more about appearances than anyone I know. That might stop them from making a scene, or it might make them more determined to pressure you in front of everyone." Despite her warnings, I decided to attend. I spent that evening picking out my outfit, settling on a navy blue dress that was elegant but not flashy. I didn't want to give my mother any ammunition about me showing off my success. As I laid out my clothes, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Looking forward to discussing things tomorrow. I'm sure we can come to an understanding." The message sent a chill down my spine. It sounded reasonable on the surface, but I knew my father well enough to recognize the threat underneath. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with all the possible scenarios that could unfold at the party. By morning, I'd almost talked myself out of going, but the thought of disappointing Aaron on his birthday, giving my parents another reason to paint me as the villain, ultimately pushed me to get ready. I applied my makeup carefully, covering the dark circles under my eyes from my sleepless night. "It's just a few hours," I told my reflection in the mirror. "You can handle anything for a few hours." As I drove to the upscale Italian restaurant my parents had chosen for the celebration, I promised myself I would stay calm, avoid confrontation, and leave at the first sign of trouble. Little did I know that no amount of preparation could have readied me for what was about to happen. Vincenzo's was one of those upscale Italian restaurants with white tablecloths, soft lighting, and waiters who spoke with affected accents. My parents had rented the private dining room at the back, no doubt stretching their already strained finances to impress the extended family. I arrived exactly on time, not wanting to be the first or last person there. The hostess led me to the private room where about 20 people were already gathered. My cousin Natalie spotted me first and waved me over. "Melissa, it's been ages," she said, air kissing both my cheeks. "Your skin looks amazing. New moisturizer?" Before I could answer, my mother materialized beside us, wearing a red dress that was at least one size too small and enough perfume to choke a horse. "You finally made it," she said, eyeing my outfit with a critical gaze. "Navy blue? Such a conservative choice. But I suppose it suits your personality." I forced a smile. "Happy to be here, Mom. The room looks beautiful." Deflection was always my best defense. "Yes, well, we wanted everything to be perfect for Aaron's special day. He only turns 30 once." She lowered her voice to a stage whisper. "Did you see the Petersons are here? Their daughter just bought a vacation home in Aspen. On a teacher's salary. Can you imagine? They must be helping her out. That's what supportive parents do." The dig wasn't subtle, but I let it slide, scanning the room for my brother. I spotted him near the bar, surrounded by friends, laughing loudly. He looked happy, his face slightly flushed from already having had a few drinks. My father intercepted me before I could reach Aaron. He was wearing his successful businessman's suit, the one that only came out for special occasions or important meetings. "Melissa," he said, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder and leaning in close enough that I could smell the whiskey on his breath. "So, good of you to join us. Aaron will be thrilled. We need to talk later about our discussion earlier this week. I have some new thoughts on the arrangement." "Dad, this isn't the time or place," I said quietly. "Let's just enjoy Aaron's birthday." His fingers dug slightly into my shoulder. Of course. Family first, right?" "Speaking of family, have you met Aaron's new girlfriend?" "Lovely girl. Her father owns 3 car dealerships." I finally made my way to Aaron, gift bag in hand. His face lit up when he saw me, though whether from genuine pleasure or the effects of alcohol, I couldn't tell. "Sis," he exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that lasted a beat too long. "You made it. I wasn't sure you would, after. After what?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. He lowered his voice. "Mom and Dad mentioned you guys had some disagreement about property or something. They seemed pretty upset." Of course, they had already poisoned the well. "It's nothing to worry about today," I said, handing him the gift bag. "Happy birthday, Aaron." He peeked inside, and his eyes widened. "The chronograph. Seriously? This is awesome, Mel." For a moment, he looked like the little brother I had protected from neighborhood bullies, the one who would sneak into my room during thunderstorms because he was scared. That moment of genuine connection was shattered when my mother clinked a fork against her wine glass, announcing it was time to be seated for dinner. The seating arrangement was no accident. I found myself between my great-aunt Judith, who was nearly deaf, and my father's business associate Stanley, who had a habit of talking exclusively about golf. From my isolated position, I watched my parents hold court at the main table with Aaron, his girlfriend Paige, and the more important family members. My mother caught my eye across the room and gave me a smug smile that clearly said, "Know your place." The first course arrived, a delicate carpaccio that I picked at while Stanley detailed his new putting technique. Halfway through his monologue about golf grips, I noticed my mother leaning in close to my cousin Natalie, both of them glancing in my direction. Such a shame, I heard my mother say as the waiter refilled water glasses near their table. All alone in that big condo. We've offered to help, of course, but she's always been stubborn. By the main course, a tension headache was forming behind my eyes. I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment of peace. In the elegant marble bathroom, I leaned against the sink and took deep breaths. Just get through dessert, I told myself. Then you can leave. When I returned, I found the conversation had somehow turned to real estate. My Uncle Roger was asking about property values in my neighborhood. Lakeside Heights? Isn't that where you live, Melissa? He asked innocently. Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. Yes, in Eleanor's old condo. Though we've been discussing a change in living arrangements, haven't we, Melissa? All eyes turned to me. I took a sip of water, buying time. I'm very happy where I am, I said carefully. My father laughed too loudly. Always the independent one. But family has to stick together in tough times. We raised her to understand the importance of family, didn't we, Diana? My mother nodded solemnly. We sacrificed everything for our children. Everything. The martyrdom act was so familiar it was almost comical, but I could see it working on some of my relatives, their expressions softening with sympathy for my poor parents, with their ungrateful daughter. Aaron, perhaps sensing the brewing storm, stood up and announced it was time for cake. The lights dimmed, and a multi-tiered monstrosity was wheeled out, ablaze with 30 candles. Everyone sang, "Happy Birthday," momentarily defusing the tension. As dessert and coffee were served, my father rose for a toast. His speech started normally enough, praising Aaron's accomplishments, telling embarrassing childhood stories that made everyone laugh. Then his tone shifted. Family is everything, he said, glass raised high. When times get tough, family is all you have. Some people, his eyes found mine, forget that. They get a little success and suddenly they're too good for the people who raised them, who sacrificed for them. Murmurs rippled through the room. My face burned as relatives glanced between my father and me, picking up on the subtext. But not our Aaron, my father continued, clapping my brother on the shoulder. Aaron understands loyalty. Aaron understands gratitude. The implication was clear to everyone in the room. I wanted to disappear, to dissolve into the expensive upholstery of my chair. Instead, I sat perfectly still, face composed, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me react. As the party began to wind down, I started planning my escape. I'd made an appearance, given my gift, eaten the cake. Obligation fulfilled. But as relatives began to depart, my mother intercepted me near the coat check. We need to finish our conversation, she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Just family now, in the private room. I knew I should leave. Every instinct was screaming danger. But some combination of misplaced hope and conditioned obedience made me follow her back to the now half-empty dining room, where my father, Aaron, and Paige remained. The worst was yet to come. The private dining room had transformed from a space of celebration to something more ominous. The waitstaff had cleared most of the dishes, leaving only coffee cups, dessert plates, and several open bottles of champagne. The overhead lights had been dimmed for the cake cutting and never raised again, casting long shadows across the room. My father stood by the window, silhouetted against the city lights, swirling amber liquid in a crystal tumbler. My mother perched on the edge of a chair, her posture rigid with anticipation. Aaron lounged with his arm around Paige, looking uncomfortable but making no move to leave. Finally, my father said as I entered, "Time for a real family discussion." I remained standing near the door, calculating how quickly I could exit if needed. I thought we agreed to talk another time. "No time like the present," my father said, his words slightly slurred. "Everyone's relaxed. We've had a nice celebration." "Some of us have work tomorrow," I said, reaching for my purse. "We can schedule something later this week." My mother's voice cut through the air. always running away from your responsibilities. Your grandmother would be so disappointed in what you've become. The mention of my grandmother sparked something in me. Grandma Eleanor would be disappointed in how you're trying to manipulate and bully me out of what she specifically left to me. My father set his glass down with a sharp click. Enough games, Melissa. We need that condo. Your mother and I have decided to sell our house. The market's hot right now, and we can use the equity to restart my business. That's your decision, I said carefully. But it doesn't involve my property. We need somewhere to live in the meantime, my mother explained, as if talking to a child. The condo is perfect. You can stay with us until you find a new place, or move in with Victoria temporarily. The audacity was breathtaking. That's not happening. The condo is my home. I'm not leaving, and you're not moving in. My father's face darkened. After everything we've done for you, all the sacrifices, the money we spent raising you. What sacrifices? The words burst out before I could stop them. You didn't pay for my education. You didn't support my career. You barely acknowledged my achievements unless you could take credit for them. How dare you? My mother stood up, her face flushed. We gave you everything. Food, clothing, a roof over your head. That's called basic parenting, I said. It's the minimum legal requirement. Aaron shifted uncomfortably. Come on, Mel. They're not asking for that much. Just temporarily. I turned to him, incredulous. They want me to give up my home so they can sell theirs. How is that not asking for much? It's family, he said weakly. We help each other out. When has this family ever helped me? I asked. The question hung in the air, unanswered. My father moved closer, invading my personal space. I could smell the whiskey on his breath. I want the keys to the condo. Tonight. I stepped back. No. And this conversation is over. You ungrateful little bitch, he hissed, loud enough for Aaron and Paige to hear. That condo should have been ours. Eleanor was manipulated by you. You turned her against us. Dad, Aaron said, finally showing some concern. Maybe we should cool down. Stay out of this. My father snapped without looking at him. His eyes were fixed on me, pupils dilated with rage. Your sister needs to learn respect. I reached for my purse, determined to leave before things escalated further. I'm going home. To my condo. Call me when you're ready to have a rational conversation. As I turned toward the door, I felt a vice-like grip on my arm. My father had moved with surprising speed for a man his age, grabbing me just above the elbow. Let go of me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We're not finished, he growled. Let go. I enunciated each word, looking him directly in the eyes. Instead, his grip tightened. I winced in pain. Robert, my mother said, but not an objection. It sounded more like encouragement. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. I twisted my arm, breaking my father's grip. As I stepped back, my mother lunged forward, grabbing one of the champagne bottles from the table. I saw the movement from the corner of my eye, but couldn't react fast enough. The bottle connected with the side of my head with a sickening thud. There was no dramatic shattering of glass like in the movies. Just impact, pain, and immediate disorientation. I staggered, my vision blurring momentarily. Something warm and wet trickled down my temple and cheek. Blood. My blood. Mom. Aaron's voice seemed to come from far away. What the hell? Paige gasped, her hands covering her mouth in horror. I touched my fingers to my head, and they came away red. The reality of what had just happened crashed over me. My own mother had assaulted me with a champagne bottle at my brother's birthday party. Now look what you made me do, my mother said, as if I had somehow caused her to attack me. The bottle was still in her hand, her knuckles white around the neck. My father looked momentarily shocked, then his expression hardened. You pushed her to this, Melissa. This is on you. I backed toward the door, keeping my eyes on both of them. Stay away from me, both of you. Mel, you need to sit down, Aaron said, finally standing. You're bleeding. We should call someone. Don't bother, I said, fumbling for the door handle behind me. I'll take care of it myself, like I always have. If you walk out that door, my father threatened, don't think about coming back until you're ready to do the right thing. Blood was now dripping onto the collar of my navy dress. The right thing? You think assaulting me is the right thing? You're both insane. Dramatic as always, my mother scoffed. It was barely a tap. I looked at Aaron, silently pleading for him to acknowledge what had happened, to stand up for me just this once. He looked away, his arm going back around Paige. Happy birthday, Aaron, I said, my voice breaking slightly. Enjoy the watch. I pushed through the door and half walked, half ran through the now empty restaurant. The few remaining staff stared in shock at my bloodied face. I ignored their offers of help, needing only to get to my car, to get away. The night air hit me like a physical blow as I burst out of the restaurant. My head throbbed, and I could feel blood matting in my hair. I fumbled for my keys with shaking hands and somehow managed to get into my car. I sat there for a moment, adrenaline coursing through my body. My phone buzzed with a text from Aaron. You didn't have to make a scene. Mom's crying now. That text cemented something in me. A resolve. A clarity. I started the car and headed not home, but to the nearest emergency room. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As I drove, careful despite my swimming vision, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. Something my grandmother had told me in one of our last conversations before she passed. Something about a trust, about protection, about ensuring her legacy wouldn't be squandered. By the time I pulled into the hospital parking lot, a plan was beginning to form in my mind. My parents had no idea what they had just set in motion. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room made my head pound even harder as I sat on the edge of an examination table. The nurse, a kind woman named Brenda with tired eyes and gentle hands, cleaned the wound on my temple. You're going to need stitches, she said, inspecting the gash. The doctor will be in shortly. Can you tell me again how this happened? I hesitated, the ingrained instinct to protect my family warring with a fresh anger and betrayal. My mother hit me with a champagne bottle during an argument. Brenda's hands paused momentarily. I'm required to report incidents of domestic violence. I know, I said. I want to file a police report. She nodded, making a note in my chart. Someone from social services will come talk to you, and we can have an officer take your statement here. While waiting for the doctor, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Aaron, 1 from my father, and a series of texts from both parents already rewriting history. From Mom. I don't know why you had to overreact. You know I would never hurt you intentionally. From Dad. Your mother is distraught. You need to call and apologize for provoking her. From Aaron. This was supposed to be MY Day. Why do you always have to make everything about you? I turned off my phone and closed my eyes, leaning back against the wall. The doctor arrived, a woman with short gray hair and efficient movements. She examined the wound, confirmed I needed stitches, and asked about symptoms of concussion. After injecting a local anesthetic, she began the process of closing the 3-inch gash above my temple. 7 stitches, she said when she finished. You were lucky. Head wounds bleed a lot, but this one wasn't as deep as it could have been. Any dizziness, nausea, or vision changes. Some dizziness right after, but it's better now. I'd like to keep you for observation for a few hours, just to be safe. Head injuries can be tricky. I agreed, and was moved to a curtained area with a reclining chair. A social worker named Tanya came to speak with me, her voice low and compassionate as she explained my options. Then a police officer arrived to take my statement. I told them everything, from the history of financial manipulation to the confrontation at the restaurant. As I spoke, the events seemed both surreal and painfully clear. Do you want to press charges? The officer asked, finishing his notes. Yes, I said without hesitation. And I want a restraining order. By the time I was discharged at 3 a.m, my resolve had hardened into something unbreakable. I took an Uber home, not trusting myself to drive. My apartment felt like a sanctuary as I locked the door behind me, but I still checked every room before allowing myself to collapse on the couch, physically and emotionally exhausted. I slept until noon the next day, waking to the insistent buzzing of my doorbell. Through the peephole, I saw Victoria, concern etched on her face. I let her in, and she gasped at the sight of my stitched temple and the purple bruising spreading around it. "My God, Melissa. Aaron called me looking for you. He said there was some kind of accident, but this—" She gently touched my arm. This was no accident. I told her everything as we sat at my kitchen island, her expression shifting from shock to rage to determination. "You're staying with me until they're arrested," she insisted. "No," I said firmly. "This is my home. I'm not letting them drive me out of it." Victoria helped me secure my condo that day. We changed the locks, installed a security camera at my door, and set up recording devices on my phone for any future interactions with my family. When we finished, she made me tea and sat with me at the balcony table overlooking the park. "What's your next move?" she asked, knowing me well enough to recognize I wasn't simply going to hide and heal. I sipped my tea, considering the question. "I need to check something in my grandmother's paperwork. Something I remember her mentioning, but I never paid much attention to at the time." After Victoria left, I pulled out the fireproof box where I kept important documents. Among them was the folder of papers my grandmother's attorney had given me after the will reading. I spread them on my dining table, scanning through legal terms and provisions until I found what I was looking for. There it was in black and white. The Sullivan Family Trust, with Eleanor Sullivan as the grantor and Melissa Sullivan as the sole trustee. Assets of the trust: the property at 1487 Oakwood Drive. My parents' house. I sat back, stunned by the implications. My grandmother hadn't just left me her condo. She had placed my parents' house in a trust with me as the trustee. They didn't own their home. They never had. My grandmother had purchased it for them 20 years ago when my grandfather's medical bills had bankrupted them, but she had kept it in a trust, likely suspecting they would mismanage it. As trustee, I had legal control over the property. I could sell it if I determined it was in the best interest of the trust. The next morning, I called in sick to work and scheduled an appointment with Howard Patterson, my grandmother's attorney. His office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, all dark wood and leather furniture. He remembered me immediately. "Melissa, what happened to your head?" he asked as I sat across from his desk. "That's part of why I'm here," I explained. "I need to understand my rights as trustee of the Sullivan Family Trust." Howard's expression turned serious as I explained the situation. He listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When I finished, he removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "First, I'm very sorry this happened to you. Your grandmother would be appalled." He replaced his glasses. As for the trust, Eleanor was very clear about her intentions. She established it to provide housing for your parents while protecting the asset from their financial tendencies. "And as trustee, what authority do I have?" "Substantial authority. You can manage the property as you see fit, including selling it, provided you can demonstrate that doing so serves the purpose of the trust." "And what was that purpose, exactly?" Howard pulled a file from his cabinet and skimmed through it. The stated purpose was to provide housing security for Robert and Diana Sullivan in a manner that protects the asset from mismanagement and ensures its preservation for future generations. I thought carefully. If I could demonstrate that they have become abusive and that continuing to provide them housing enables their harmful behavior. Howard nodded slowly. That could potentially justify liquidating the asset. The proceeds would remain in the trust, but could be reinvested in a different form of housing security. A smaller property, perhaps, or a managed living situation. Over the next week, I built my case methodically. I obtained copies of the police report and medical records. I documented the history of financial manipulation through emails, texts, and bank records showing my grandmother's support of my education when my parents refused. I even found old journals where I'd recorded incidents from my childhood. Meanwhile, the situation with my family deteriorated further. Aaron sent a series of increasingly hostile texts, blaming me for tearing the family apart. My parents told extended family members that I had attacked my mother at the party and she had defended herself. Some relatives believed them. Others, who had witnessed the tension that night, reached out to check on me. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, called me directly. "I always knew Diana had issues, but this is beyond the pale," she said. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" My father left threatening voicemails. "You've made the biggest mistake of your life. No one treats family this way and gets away with it." I saved everything, building my case stronger with each new contact. 2 weeks after the incident, I met again with Howard. We reviewed all the evidence, and he nodded gravely. "I believe you have sufficient grounds to proceed with the sale of the property," he said. "I'll prepare the necessary paperwork." "How quickly can this happen?" I asked. "Given the current market, very quickly. I know several investors who buy properties for cash with minimal inspection periods. We could have an offer within days." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. "Let's proceed." As I left Howard's office, I realized I wasn't acting out of pure revenge. There was justice in this, yes, but also protection. My parents had shown they were willing to assault me to get what they wanted. I needed to remove their ability to hurt me further, and that meant removing their power. The real estate market was indeed hot. Within 3 days, Howard had secured an all-cash offer from an investor looking to renovate and flip the property. The sale could close in 2 weeks. All that remained was to inform my parents. I decided to deliver the news in person, with safeguards in place. Victoria would accompany me, along with Howard. We would meet in a public place, and I would have the restraining order with me. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change our family forever. The coffee shop we chose for the meeting was busy enough to ensure safety, but quiet enough for a private conversation. I arrived early with Victoria and Howard, selecting a table near the back with a clear view of the entrance. My hands trembled slightly as I arranged the folder of documents in front of me, but my resolve remained firm. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Victoria asked, her hand covering mine briefly. I nodded. They left me no choice. At exactly 2 o'clock, my parents walked in. They spotted me immediately, their expressions shifting from uncertainty to tightly controlled anger as they approached the table. My mother's gaze fixed on the still visible stitches at my temple, but her face showed no remorse. "Melissa," my father said stiffly, glancing at Victoria and Howard. "I see you've brought reinforcements. Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the empty chairs across from us. "This is Victoria, whom you know, and Howard Patterson, Grandma Eleanor's attorney." My parents exchanged a look before sitting. My mother adjusted her scarf nervously. "Is this about dropping those ridiculous charges? Because we're willing to forgive your overreaction if you are." The audacity still had the power to stun me. "No," I said evenly. "This is about your living situation." My father leaned forward, a glint of triumph in his eyes. "So, you've reconsidered our proposal about the condo? I knew you'd come around eventually." "No," I repeated. "This is about the house you're currently living in." Howard cleared his throat and opened his briefcase. "Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan, I'm here in my capacity as the attorney for the Sullivan Family Trust, of which Melissa is the sole trustee." My mother's brow furrowed. "What trust? What are you talking about?" Howard slid a document across the table. "This trust, established by Eleanor Sullivan 15 years ago. The trust owns the property at 1487 Oakwood Drive." My father's face paled as he scanned the document. "This is nonsense. We own our house. We have a mortgage." "You have a mortgage on a property owned by the trust," Howard corrected. "Eleanor made the down payment and established the trust with Melissa as trustee. Your mortgage payments have essentially been rent." "That's impossible," my mother whispered, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. I pulled out another document. "This is a notice of sale. The property has been sold to an investment group. Closing is in 2 weeks. You have 30 days from today to vacate." The color drained from my father's face. "You can't do this. That's our home." "I can and I have," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "As trustee, I have determined that maintaining your current living situation is not in line with the trust's purpose, particularly given recent events. Recent events? My mother repeated incredulously. You mean your dramatic overreaction at the party? That little tap on the head? Victoria bristled beside me, but I placed a warning hand on her arm. I mean your assault on me with a champagne bottle that required 7 stitches and resulted in a concussion, I corrected. An assault that occurred because I refused to give you my condo. This is revenge, my father hissed, his fists clenching on the table. Pure and simple.
No, I said.
This is consequence. Grandma Eleanor put me in charge of this trust because she knew exactly who you were. She wanted me to protect her assets from exactly this kind of situation. Where are we supposed to go? My mother demanded, her voice rising. Several nearby customers glanced our way. I slid a third document across the table. The trust has purchased a 2-bedroom condo in Riverdale Heights. It's being held for your use. The monthly HOA fees and property taxes will be covered by the trust, but all other expenses are your responsibility. My father's face contorted with rage. Riverdale Heights? That's a retirement community. It's an adult community, I corrected, with security and management that will ensure the property is well maintained. We're not moving to some shoebox in a glorified nursing home, my mother snapped. That's your choice, I said with a shrug. But you are moving out of Oakwood Drive in 30 days. Where you go is up to you. My father half rose from his chair, but Howard's steady gaze and Victoria's protective posture made him reconsider. He sank back down, trembling with barely contained fury. You'll regret this, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Family doesn't do this to family. I met his gaze, without flinching. Family doesn't assault family with champagne bottles, either. Or try to steal their homes. Or manipulate and gaslight them for decades. We gave you everything, my mother insisted, tears welling in her eyes. Crocodile tears, I knew from long experience. You gave me trauma and insecurity, I countered. Grandma Eleanor gave me love, support, and, apparently, protection from exactly this situation. Howard calmly gathered his papers. All the documentation has been filed with the county. The sale is proceeding. I suggest you use these next 30 days to organize your move. As we stood to leave, my father made one last desperate attempt. What will people say? The neighbors, the family? Our daughter, throwing us out of our home. They'll say exactly what you've trained them to say, I replied. That I'm the ungrateful, selfish daughter who doesn't respect family. And I've finally made peace with that. The aftermath was exactly as explosive as I'd expected. My phone blew up with calls and texts from Aaron, cousins, aunts, and uncles. Some were horrified by my actions, others quietly supportive once they heard the full story. Aaron left a particularly vicious voicemail, calling me every name in the book and vowing never to speak to me again. My parents initially refused to leave, forcing us to begin formal eviction proceedings. But as the sale closing date approached and reality set in, they finally began packing. I drove past the house one afternoon to find a moving truck in the driveway and my father supervising movers with a thunderous expression. They didn't take the condo in Riverdale Heights. Instead, they rented a small apartment near Aaron, who apparently had offered to help support them. The trust money from the house sale was invested conservatively, as my grandmother would have wanted, available if they ever decided to accept the alternative housing. Some family members stopped speaking to me entirely. Others reached out secretly, admitting they'd always seen the dysfunction but had been afraid to say anything. My Aunt Patricia became an unexpected ally, sharing stories of how my mother had always been manipulative, even as a child. The hardest part was the harassment. For weeks, I received constant calls from blocked numbers. My parents would show up at my office or in the parking garage of my building, forcing me to get a more comprehensive restraining order. I installed additional security at my condo and started varying my routes to work. Through it all, Victoria remained my rock. They're desperate because you took away their power, she reminded me during a particularly difficult night after Aaron had shown up drunk at my door, screaming insults until security removed him. They never expected you to fight back. 3 months after the sale, I received a small package in the mail with no return address. Inside was my grandmother's old recipe box and a note from my mother. "I suppose you should have this too, since you've taken everything else." It was meant to hurt me, but instead, I found it oddly healing. Among the recipe cards, I found handwritten notes from my grandmother, little messages of love and wisdom she had tucked away for me to find someday. One card in particular stood out. It wasn't a recipe at all, but a message written in my grandmother's elegant script. "Melissa, if you're reading this, you've found your strength. I always knew you would. Some people confuse family with ownership. Never let anyone own your spirit. Love, Grandma Eleanor." I sat on my balcony that evening, the recipe box in my lap, watching the sunset over the park. For the first time since that awful night at the restaurant, I felt something like peace beginning to take root inside me. The wound on my temple had healed, leaving only a faint silver scar. The deeper wounds would take longer, but I knew now they would heal too. I had survived. I had protected myself. And in doing so, I had honored my grandmother's true legacy. 6 months after selling my parents' house, I stood in my newly renovated living room, admiring the transformation. Gone were the gray walls and minimalist furniture that had defined the space before. In their place were warm terracotta tones, comfortable seating, and personal touches that made the condo truly mine, free from the shadow of family drama. The renovation had been therapeutic, a physical manifestation of my emotional healing. Each decision, from the art on the walls to the placement of furniture, had been mine alone, without the critical voice of my mother in my head questioning my choices. My therapy sessions with Dr. Lauren had been instrumental in my recovery. Twice weekly at first, then gradually reducing to once a week, we had unpacked decades of manipulation, gaslighting, and emotional abuse. "Family systems like yours create powerful conditioning," she had explained during one session. "Your parents trained you from childhood to prioritize their needs and emotions above your own. Breaking that programming isn't easy, but you're doing it." The restraining order against my parents had been extended after several violations. They had eventually moved to Arizona, where Aaron had relocated for a job opportunity. The distance brought relief, though occasional flying monkeys still reached out to pressure me into reconciliation. "Family is everything," my cousin Mark had insisted during a surprise visit. "You can't just cut them off forever. Family should be about love and support, not control and abuse." I had responded calmly. "When they can respect my boundaries, we can discuss a relationship." I had reconnected with relatives who validated my experience, particularly my Aunt Patricia and my grandmother's sister, Great Aunt Judith, who had stories about Eleanor that helped me understand why she had set up the trust the way she did. "Your grandmother knew exactly who her daughter was," Aunt Judith told me over tea one afternoon. "Diana had been taking advantage of Eleanor's generosity for years. The trust was Eleanor's way of protecting you while still ensuring her daughter had shelter." Victoria had become even more important in my life, the sister I chose rather than the brother I was born with. We had a standing Sunday brunch date where we would process the week's events and remind each other of our worth. "Have you heard from Aaron?" she asked during one such brunch, 6 months after he had moved to Arizona. "An email last week," I admitted, less hostile than usual. He asked how I was doing. "Progress," Victoria noted, raising her mimosa in a small toast. The most unexpected development in my healing journey had been my volunteer work with a local organization supporting survivors of domestic violence. What had started as a one-time donation in gratitude for my own escape had evolved into a regular commitment. Every Tuesday evening, I helped with a support group for women rebuilding their lives after abuse. It doesn't always look like bruises, I shared during my first meeting as a facilitator. Sometimes it's financial control. Sometimes it's isolation. Sometimes it's making you doubt your own reality. But it's all abuse, and you all deserve better. Working with these women had given purpose to my pain. Each time I saw someone reclaim their power, I felt my grandmother's legacy living on through me. My professional life had flourished as well. Freed from the emotional drain of my toxic family dynamics, I had energy to pour into my career. I had been promoted to senior agent at my firm and was mentoring new agents, particularly women from difficult backgrounds. One crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after the incident at the restaurant, I received an unexpected email from Aaron. The subject line read simply, "I'm sorry." The message inside was brief but significant. "I've been doing some thinking. Some therapy too. I realize now that I didn't protect you when I should have. What Mom did was wrong. What I did afterward was wrong too. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I see the truth now." I sat with that email for days before responding. Finally, I wrote back, "Thank you for this. It means a lot. I'm not ready for a relationship yet, but I appreciate your acknowledgement. I hope you're taking care of yourself." It wasn't forgiveness, not quite yet, but it was an opening, a possibility. And that felt like enough for now. The most profound change had been internal. The constant anxiety, the people-pleasing instinct, the doubt that had been my lifelong companions had begun to recede. In their place grew confidence, boundaries, and a deep sense of self-worth. The greatest gift my grandmother gave me wasn't the condo or the trusteeship, I told Dr. Lauren during a session. It was the example of a woman who knew her worth and stood in her power. I just didn't recognize it until I was forced to find those qualities in myself. On the anniversary of my grandmother's death, I visited her grave with a bouquet of her favorite daisies. As I sat on the small bench beside her headstone, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced there before. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered, "for seeing what I needed before I knew it myself. For protecting me even after you were gone." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and I smiled, remembering her favorite saying, "Life doesn't always give you what you want, Melissa, but it always gives you what you need to grow." The journey from victim to survivor to thriver hadn't been linear. There were still days when old patterns of thought crept in, when guilt or doubt clouded my judgment. But those days grew fewer as I practiced setting boundaries, honoring my needs, and recognizing my worth. The small scar above my temple had faded to a thin silver line, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. Sometimes I caught sight of it in the mirror and felt a pang of sadness for the family I had lost. More often, though, I saw it as a reminder of my strength, of my refusal to be victimized, of my capacity to protect myself. True family, I had learned, wasn't defined by blood or obligation. It was built on respect, support, and love freely given. I had found that family in Victoria, in my support group, in the colleagues who had stood by me, in the clients who trusted me with their dreams. And most importantly, I had found it in myself. In the woman who had faced her deepest fears, who had stood up to her abusers, who had reclaimed her power and her peace. The woman my grandmother had always seen, even when I couldn't see her myself. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between keeping peace in your family and protecting your own well-being? Share your experience in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content about setting boundaries and healing from family trauma. Your support means the world to me, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength on your own journey to healing.